the night train to nowhere in particular. He told me he wasn't afraid of needles. He said it the way people say they're not afraid of heights, right before they grab the railing with both hands and refuse to look down. I noticed his fingers first. They were wrapped around the edge of the fold-down table in our train compartment, knuckles just slightly pale, and I thought, oh, honey, I've seen that grip before. I know exactly what that grip means. But I didn't say anything yet, because there's an art to this, and the art begins long before you ever open the packaging on a needle. I should back up. It was a Thursday in late October, somewhere between Chicago and Denver on an overnight Amtrak, and the train was doing that thing trains do in the dark, swaying just enough to make you feel like the world has gone slightly liquid. The heating system was working too well, the way heating systems do on trains, and the whole car smelled like warm upholstery and someone's leftover coffee, and that particular brand of sleepy intimacy that only exists when strangers are stuck together in a small space moving through the dark. I was traveling with my kid. I usually do. Old habit from years of being the person in any group who happens to have medical training, and, inevitably, the person someone calls at 2 a.m. saying, I think something might be wrong. My bag had the basics: a few syringes still in packaging, alcohol swabs, a small vial of B12 that my aunt had asked me to bring her in Denver, gauze, tape, the usual. I wasn't planning to use any of it that night. And then the man in the seat across from me, dark jacket, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, a paperback he hadn't actually been reading for the last 40 minutes, said very quietly, "You're a nurse?" He'd seen me rearranging my bag when I was looking for my headphones. The packaging is pretty recognizable if you know what you're looking at. "Nurse practitioner," I said, "technically." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "I don't suppose you'd..." And then he stopped, looked out the window at the absolute darkness rushing past. Started again. "I have a prescription. Vitamin B12 injection. My doctor said I need to start them weekly. I was going to have it done at a clinic in Denver tomorrow, but I've been feeling..." He paused. "I've been feeling pretty rough today, actually." I looked at him properly then. And yes, now that I was paying attention, there was a grayness around his eyes, a kind of careful stillness that people have when they're managing something, fatigue that goes deeper than a long travel day. "How long have you been symptomatic?" I asked. He blinked. "Is that a yes?" "It's a question first," I said. "Then maybe a yes." He smiled, just slightly, and I thought, okay, this is going to be an interesting few hours. His name was Elliot. He was 43, an architect from Boston, traveling to Denver to see a project he'd been working on for 2 years finally break ground. He'd been diagnosed with B12 deficiency about 6 weeks earlier, which explained quite a lot, he said. The fatigue, the brain fog, the feeling of walking through water that he'd been dismissing as stress for the better part of a year. "I kept thinking it was just work," he said. "You know how it is. You tell yourself you're tired because you're busy, not because something's actually wrong." I did know how it is. I've watched so many people do exactly that, explain away the signals their body is sending because the alternative, the idea that something might need attention, feels like too much to deal with on top of everything else. It's not denial exactly. It's more like a negotiation. Not now, later. I'll deal with it later. The thing about B12 deficiency is that it's sneaky. It builds slowly. Your body stores enough to last a while, so by the time you're actually symptomatic, really symptomatic, not just tired, you've often been running low for months. The neurological symptoms are the ones that worry me most. The tingling in the hands, the memory gaps, the fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. Elliot had all three. He'd been attributing them to turning 43 and working too hard, which, fair, but also, no. Did your doctor explain why injections instead of oral supplements? I asked. He shook his head. She said something about absorption. Right, so B12 absorption in the gut depends on something called intrinsic factor. It's a protein your stomach produces. Some people just don't produce enough of it, especially as they get older. And without it, oral B12 doesn't absorb well, no matter how much you take. The injection bypasses all of that. Goes straight into the muscle, into the bloodstream. Much more reliable. He was listening in that particular way, head slightly tilted, the reading glasses still pushed up, and I had the distinct impression he was the kind of person who liked understanding why things worked, not just that they did. So the injection is actually better, he said, for people with absorption issues, significantly better. You'll probably feel the difference within a few days. Some people feel it within hours. He was quiet for a moment. The train swayed. Outside, a smear of distant lights, some small town sliding past in the dark. I really am not afraid of needles, he said. Of course not, I said. He looked at me. I kept my face perfectly neutral. Okay, he said. Maybe a little. Here's the thing I want you to understand about people who are afraid of needles. And I say this with complete affection, because I have held the hands of grown adults who have run marathons, climbed mountains, argued cases before judges, and still turned the color of old paper at the sight of a syringe. The fear is not about the pain. Not really. The pain of an intramuscular injection, done correctly, is genuinely minimal. A brief pressure, maybe a second of sharp sensation, and then it's over. What people are actually afraid of is the surrender. The moment where you have to hold still and trust someone else to do something to your body. That's the real thing. That's what the knuckles on the table grip is about. And I think that's worth naming, actually. Because when you understand that, you stop trying to convince people it won't hurt, which is a battle you'll never fully win. And you start giving them something else instead. You give them control over what they can control. You explain each step before you do it. You let them choose the moment, in a sense. You make the unknown known. That's the real technique. Before the needle even comes out of the packaging, I asked Elliot if he'd eaten recently. He had. A sandwich a couple of hours ago. Good. I asked if he was hydrated. He held up a water bottle, half full. Better. Okay, I said. I'm going to walk you through exactly what I'm doing as I do it. And if at any point you want to stop, you say the word and we stop. Deal? Deal, he said, and some of the tension in his shoulders, just slightly, let go. I washed my hands at the little sink at the end of the car, came back, put on my gloves, that particular sound of nitrile snapping into place, which I've always found oddly satisfying, like the click of a seatbelt. Got out the vial, the syringe, the alcohol swabs. For a B12 intramuscular injection, you have a few site options. The deltoid, that's the shoulder muscle, is common for smaller volumes, up to about 1 milliliter. The vastus lateralis, which is the outer thigh, works well and is actually easier for self-injection if someone needs to do it themselves. The ventrogluteal site, the hip area, is considered the gold standard for IM injections in adults because it's away from major nerves and blood vessels and has good muscle mass. But it's harder to access in a moving train at night, so we were going with the deltoid. I'm going to need you to push your sleeve up, I said, as far as it'll go. I need to see the muscle. He did. The deltoid, you find it by locating the acromion process, which is the bony point at the top of the shoulder. Come down about 2 to 3 finger widths below that, and you're in the right zone. The muscle should feel firm, not bony, not too close to the edge where the tissue gets thin. You want the meaty part, the middle third of the muscle. I pressed gently with 2 fingers to identify the landmark. He watched my hands. "You're looking for the muscle?" he asked. "Finding the right spot," I said. "There's a zone about the size of a silver dollar where this is ideal. Too high and you're near the shoulder joint. Too low and you're getting into territory with nerves you don't want to bother." "Nerves you don't want to bother," he repeated. "That's a technical term?" "Very technical," I said. "We use it in all the journals." He laughed, a real one, surprised out of him, and in that moment his shoulder relaxed completely. Which was, if I'm honest, exactly why I said it. Relaxed muscle matters. This is not a small thing. A tensed deltoid is harder to penetrate. It causes more pain, and the medication disperses less evenly. When a patient is braced and rigid, the whole experience is worse for everyone. So you make them laugh, or you ask them a question they actually want to answer, or you say something slightly absurd right at the key moment. Whatever it takes to get that muscle soft. I cleaned the site with an alcohol swab, let it air dry for a few seconds. This part matters more than people think, because if you inject through wet alcohol, it stings more, and you introduce a small amount of the alcohol into the tissue, which is irritating. You let it dry. Takes maybe 15 seconds. Those 15 seconds are worth it. "Small pinch," I said. "Breathe out slowly." He breathed out. I held the skin taut with my non-dominant hand. This helps the needle enter smoothly, reduces the sensation of the skin being pushed rather than pierced. And I inserted the needle at a 90-degree angle. Firm, smooth, no hesitation. Hesitation is what causes pain. A confident, steady motion is actually kinder than a slow, tentative one, even though that seems counterintuitive. Your instinct when you're nervous is to go slowly, carefully. But slow and uncertain drags the needle through tissue instead of sliding through it. He made a small sound, not pain, more like surprise that it was already done. "That's it?" he said. "Almost. I'm going to aspirate slightly first." I drew back the plunger just a hair, checking that I wasn't in a blood vessel. No blood return. Good. Now I'll inject slowly. You might feel a pressure sensation. That's normal. I depress the plunger steadily, not fast. Fast hurts because the medication needs time to disperse into the muscle tissue. Not too slow either. About 10 seconds for a milliliter. The B12 solution is a deep red, almost jewel-colored, and I've always found something quietly beautiful about that. This small, bright thing, moving from the syringe into the body, carrying something the body needs. "Pressure," he said. Yeah, I feel that." Almost done. And then it was. I withdrew the needle cleanly, same angle as entry, no twisting, and pressed a clean gauze pad over the site immediately. Light pressure, not rubbing. Rubbing just irritates the tissue and spreads the medication unevenly. Just gentle, steady pressure for about 30 seconds. "Done," I said. He turned his head to look at his shoulder, as if expecting to see something dramatic. There was nothing to see. Just the tiny mark, barely visible, already covered by the gauze. "That was it," he said again. Less a question this time. "That was it." He let out a long breath, and then he laughed again, this time at himself, I think. at the weeks of low-grade dread that had amounted to 30 seconds and a small pressure sensation on a train somewhere over the Colorado border. I know that laugh. I have heard that laugh so many times. It's one of my favorite sounds in the world, honestly. That particular exhale of relief that's also a little bit sheepish. The body releasing something it had been holding. "You're going to feel a little soreness there tomorrow," I told him, "like after a workout. That's just the muscle responding to the injection, completely normal. If it's still sore in 3 or 4 days, that would be worth mentioning to your doctor, but it almost certainly won't be." He nodded, pulled his sleeve back down. "Thank you," he said. And there was something in the way he said it, simple, direct, no performance, that I appreciated. "Of course," I said. We sat in comfortable quiet for a while after that. The train moved through the dark. Someone a few rows back was snoring softly. The heating system ticked. After a bit, he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Does it ever get strange, doing this for people you don't know?" I thought about that. The honest answer is complicated. "Strange isn't quite the word," I said. "It's more, there's something about it that I think people don't expect. You let someone close enough to do this, and there's a kind of trust in that that has nothing to do with knowing each other. It's almost more pure in a way, because it's not personal, it's just human." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a generous way to think about it," he said. "It's the only way I know how," I said. And I meant it. I've thought about this a lot over the years, why I chose this work, what it gives me that other things don't. And I keep coming back to this. There's a specific kind of intimacy in the clinical moment that I find genuinely moving. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's so quiet. 2 people in a small space, one of them trusting the other with something that matters. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. He asked about the B12, how long before he'd feel better, what he should watch for, whether the weekly injections would be permanent. I told him it depended on the underlying cause. If it was dietary, common in vegans and vegetarians, since B12 is almost entirely found in animal products, then supplementing consistently, whether by injection or high-dose oral once the levels were up, could eventually get him to a maintenance dose. If it was absorption-related, he'd likely need injections indefinitely, but the frequency often drops to monthly once levels stabilize. "Your doctor will check your levels again in a few months," I said. "The numbers will tell you which category you're in." "What are the numbers supposed to look like?" "Normal range is roughly 200 to 900 picograms per milliliter. Below 200 is deficient. You said you were symptomatic, so I'd guess yours were pretty low." He nodded. 147, he said. "Yeah, that tracks." "The good news," I said, "is that B12 deficiency is very treatable,